Welcome to the Well Prepared Life podcast, where we dive into the fundamentals of readiness for life's challenges, covering topics from personal responsibility to mental and physical preparedness and beyond. Let's forge resilience, nurture growth, and embrace responsibility on the journey to the well prepared life. Well, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Well Prepared Life. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Kyle.
And this week, we want to talk about community. Part of our goal of forging resilience, nurturing growth, embracing responsibility is this element that you can't do it alone. When things go wrong, who do you rely on? But also when things go right, who do you celebrate with?
Yeah.
I think it's both sides of that. And you need to have both of those things to live a full life. And I think that's one of the things that, I don't know if I stated as clearly as I wanted to, the well-prepared life is the full life. Like you can almost like translate those things as far as like go back and forth, as far as like, I want to live the full life. I want to live a well-prepared life. Like I want those things. The reason I want to be well-prepared is because I want my life to be full.
Yeah.
I don't want it. I want it to be able to like experience like the highs of life and understand the lows and be able to work through them. I don't want to just be like ready for the worst and always struggling.
Right.
I prepare so that I can have like peace,
And enjoyment.
Yeah, not out of anxiety.
Yeah. And I think this is a pretty important topic because it's a loneliness epidemic in the country. I feel like I've seen a lot of articles or heard a lot of sources say that we're at the highest peak that we've ever been in with amount of loneliness in the world, in the country specifically. Which
is wild because like from a digital perspective, we're more connected than we ever have been.
Right. Right.
Like I've watched a couple of podcasts and like read some articles on this idea of like, basically it's something called the atomization of people, where it used to be, if you look throughout history, you had your tribe.
Okay.
As far as like you had your family and then your tribe. Those are the people that you knew.
Yes.
And those are, in a lot of history, most of history, those are the only people that you knew. You had the trader that came through occasionally, but otherwise, and that's how you like heard about the outside world. But it's like you really didn't communicate outside of your family and your tribe.
Yeah.
And that was like, and you were dependent on each other completely. And that was, community was like literally necessary for living.
Right.
And I would argue it still is today, but you can like, in the sense that like we have to rely on tools and tasks and jobs and stuff that other people do. So it's like, you can't just like, technically you could go out homestead in the middle of nowhere, build your own home, build your own thing. But it's like what the tools you bring are built by somebody else. So it's like, so we're all dependent on somebody else in some way. But that was where like it started.
You just don't know those people nowadays.
Yeah.
They're strangers.
And so now we're at a spot where thankfully, like I've done work to talk to most of my neighbors, but I have some neighbors that live across from me that we went over, we tried to introduce ourselves. They just weren't home. And like, but also I've been bad about like trying again. And I'm like, but I don't know their names. I don't know the names of the people that live literally like 50 feet away from me.
Right.
And thankfully I do know like on either side and back of me. So it's like, I am trying to connect with people around me.
Yeah.
But it's like the people that live right across from me, I see him mowing his lawn and I'm like, I know that he has a kid or two.
Yeah.
But I don't know them. And so we've gone from this like this family and tribe to now it's like we have these people that we live next to that we don't even know at all. And it's like, but at the same time, it's like we have access to more people and more interactions and more relationships than we ever have been before.
So what do you think the disconnect is? Because we've got like a lot of connections, but we don't have that. We still have loneliness. So why do you think are some factors in that?
I think it's like there's two thoughts of it. This one is like technology is like shaped how we think and how we interact with people. And so I think that's a factor in that, and especially considering it's like when you look at like historical like tribes, like they didn't have technology. It's like, what are you going to do? Like you're going to interact with people. There's also this this choice element now. Have you ever heard of the idea of option overload?
Yeah.
Where it's like you have so many options that you end up not choosing anything.
Right. Oh, was it analysis paralysis? Something
like that's another way of putting it.
Yeah.
But like my wife is gluten-free just because it causes migraines and because of inflammation and stuff. And so when we go to restaurants, there's been times like we went to the Cheesecake Factory a while ago for a date night. And it was kind of funny because she's like, I'm actually glad that I'm gluten free tonight because the options are so
many.
like there. I have fewer options.
Yeah.
And looking at you try to figure out what to eat with all of these
Oh
options,
man,
she's like, I would be stressed out just trying to choose.
that menu is pages long.
Oh, it's too long.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, my brief side note is that when they started like trying to and it's all called what was it? Specialties.
Yeah.
Every page
Yeah.
says specialties. And I'm like, not everything can be a specialty.
They're all specialties.
Like you're not that good.
Nothing special.
But yeah, so I think that, and I don't want to, I'm not an expert on this by any means, but I think, so
Yeah.
I think part of it's technology. I think part of it is, like you see, so kind of going back to the historical narrative, where up until, and I'm kind of doing big ranges at this point, but up until like the mid late 1800s, everybody, it was an agricultural society. And it's like you had farmers, and farmers, like, well, it wasn't the only reason for having a big family. One of the reasons for a big family was to be
help
able
out.
to like run the farm.
Yeah.
And while not everybody lived in the farm, it was much more like that was more people did that than lived in cities. And
Okay.
I don't know if I'd say that. More people did that than they do today.
Yeah.
As far as like that was much like as far as a percentage of people at the very least.
Proportion. Yeah. Okay.
Well, then we get into like the Industrial Revolution, and we now have cities are becoming like people are moving to cities because that's where the jobs are.
Yeah.
And when you get to a spot where it's like there are so many people around you that like sure you can build relationships with a certain number of people, but I think there's been stats said that it's like you can really only have like reasonably like intimate relationships with like up to like, and this is like kind of a generous number of like 100 people.
I heard that. Yes. Like
Where-
150 was that. I
Yeah,
think.
where it's like 100, 150, where it's
something
like
like
you
that.
can like
Yeah.
actually know and like interact with personally
Yeah.
with about 150 people.
First name basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before it gets to the point where you're like, you don't really know them. You might if you have a good memory, you might know their name
Right.
and like some like facts about them, but you don't know what's going on in their life.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and for me, as somebody that like one of my if you've taken Strengths Finders or heard of that,
I've heard of it. Yeah.
one of mine is Relator,
Mhm.
and part of one of the strengths is that I like really deep, personal, close relationships with a few people.
Yeah.
And so I'm on the side of things where I'm like, I know names of probably 100 plus people,
Yeah.
but I'm really only like close with like a few,
Right.
like 5 to 10 that
Yeah.
I would consider myself like very close with. I would say the friend, so that would be like close friends, 5 to 10, maybe not even that. And it's like, and then it's like my like casual friends is what I call it, is in
Okay.
that like probably like
20, 30.
maybe
Yeah.
like
okay.
the people I work with.
Extra.
Yeah, the people I work with and then some associates. So yeah, probably 20, 30 at
Okay.
this point.
Okay.
Just as far as I call casual friends, where it's like I enjoy hanging out with them when I hang out with them, but I'm not going out of my way to like get time with them.
And you kind of know a little bit about their life, but you don't really know like deep things about their life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like we're not having, like we would occasionally have a deep conversation if the right circumstance was there. And I wouldn't necessarily shy away from that, but I'm not like seeking them out to have deep conversations.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay.
and so that'd be like that 20 to 30 range. And then it's like you get into like your like acquaintances, and that's probably like 80 plus
Right.
kind of people. I part of my job is I manage a lot of volunteers, and so most of those people I would say are in that acquaintance realm.
Okay.
Where it's like nothing against any of them, but it's just
Yeah.
it's a lot of people. Like I manage a team of 70 volunteers,
Dang.
and I am proud to say that like I can like call most of them by name, like almost all of them. Like it's
That's
probably
pretty
like
good.
just
70
a
people?
couple, just like a couple new people that come up that I'm like, what was your name again? And
Dang.
like, but where it's like I can call any one of them out. My next goal is kind of like to know like their spouses, and then after that will be kids' names. Like as
Yeah.
far as like that's kind of the next thing is that I want to be able to do.
Yeah.
But you get me outside of that, and I'm like I don't know anybody
Yeah.
else. And okay, so that's like your normal in-person interaction kind of thing.
Right. Just natural bandwidth and natural.
Yeah.
ability
And so
to
that would be
handle.
like your structure. But so you take this historical element of it where it's like you have people that you relied on for life in your tribe and like your family and tribe.
Yeah.
And then you have your industrial revolution where it's like you can go to the store to get food.
Mhm.
You can go to work, go home, and not have to work, like hang out with or interact with the people you work with outside of work. Like you can actually leave work at work.
Yeah.
Like that was not as much of a thing before the Industrial Revolution. Like it's like your life was your work versus after that, it was like, no, your work could be your work and then you could do other things outside of work.
Yeah.
Like there's a saying now where it's like, I work to live my life. Like as far as like, I work in order to have money to do the things I actually want to do.
Right.
Up until a certain point in history, that wasn't how it worked.
Yeah, I heard recently it's like Gen Xers was the first generation where it was starting to shift from work to live to work to work to live.
Possibly. I
Shift
would say it's
when that
earlier
shift.
than that.
Mhm.
Like just as far
Like
as my
boomers.
subjective perspective on this. And I would say it was probably earlier than that. Not in the sense that like people didn't enjoy their jobs and they got to do things that they wanted, but in the sense that like the option of like that you
Of
could work a
having to
job
work.
and then go on vacation.
Oh,
A
okay.
working job and then like do other hobbies outside of work.
Okay,
Like
gotcha.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Where it's like
interesting.
most people throughout history,
Just
how they
work.
spent their day was how they made a living.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
and what they did. And they may have, like, they might play games. They have sports. Like, they do things. Not that they don't have any hobbies, but it was like, there wasn't a whole leave work at work. It was just
Yeah.
your life.
Either way, we're
Like, farmers is, like, where that's really evident.
Yeah. So, but either way, we're at a very small proportion of American history. We're like U.S.
Yeah.
Not U.S.
It's
sorry.
just,
Human history.
Yeah.
Sorry, I keep wanting to say you.
um,
Human history, where we've had the ability to have an option outside of
yeah.
work.
And so it's like small portion, last couple hundred years kind
Yeah.
of thing at the largest
Right.
scale.
That percentage, like
And like, which is
small
like,
percentage.
yeah, even if you're like on the more younger side of things, it's still a very small amount of time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
And then, so then it's like, now you get into the internet age of the 2000s, and it's like, well, I can have as many friends as I want. Like
Right.
Facebook, when Facebook was really
Thousands,
big,
millions.
where it's like, yeah, people have thousands of friends.
Mhm.
And it's like, you don't interact with thousands of people.
Right.
Like, as far as like, not actually.
Yeah. And we were talking a little bit just before about how even if it is online interactions, there's
Yeah.
still like a level of connection that you lose. I think, what was it? Albert Mehrabian said that 55% of communication is nonverbal. It's just the body language.
Yeah.
So if you're on Facebook sending messages to people, you just can't get that true, genuine self. Like you're missing half of communication, 55%.
And so that like leads into, so you have the internet age and like things are happening where it's like you're connecting with people that you are like not actually connected with in
Right.
person.
Right.
Or it's people that you have connected with in person, but you're like, I want to keep up with them. And
Okay.
some people actually do that,
Mhm.
but we saw that quickly morph into like people posting like, and like this is not new in human history and like humanity,
Mhm.
where it's like people want to make themselves look the best they can to the
Oh,
people
sure.
around them.
Yeah.
But it was amplified by now you can post very selective pictures
Yeah.
of the best parts of your life
Right.
and almost make it appear as though this is your life.
hmm
And so you have a shift in how people present each to themselves, where there's almost, so it's like kind of like walking back through that. So you have your tribe, your family,
hmm
they knew you.
Yeah.
You're not hiding.
Deeply.
You're not hiding who you are from them.
Right.
You have your industrial revolution. You have the ability to like leave work at work. You can kind of have a little bit more of that. Like I act this way at work and I act this way at home.
Yeah.
And people don't necessarily know the difference unless they are in both of those spheres.
hmm
And now you have a spot where it's like you have a whole nother sphere of online where I can act
Completely
different, whether it's good or bad.
Right. Right.
Where I can act like I'm the perfect picture of humanity, but actually I'm a terrible father.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
as far as like I don't do this, and so it's like you have this whole disconnect, and even just as we're talking, like the thought that comes to mind is like I think one of the reasons for why we're at the spot we're at
Mhm.
is people aren't known,
Oh, that's good.
and so
They're
it's like
lonely because you're not seen and heard.
yeah,
You're
people
not
don't
truly
you're
known.
not actually known.
Yeah. That's
You
interesting.
think you're known. You're known of as far as I know of Kyle. Like I know who he is.
Yeah.
Like that's like where it's like a celebrity. I heard it put this one way, and like not to like Taylor Swift is big right now. This isn't about her. I just heard it put this way, using her as an example. As far as like if Taylor Swift is having a party, you as a fan, which actually you happen to be a fairly big Taylor Swift fan
I enjoy
from
music.
what I've heard. But where it's like you as a fan couldn't go to her house when she's having a party and be like, "Hey Taylor, I know you."
Right.
You're
Right.
like, no, you know of Taylor.
Right.
Versus like somebody that's like traveled with her, grown up with her, close to her, that she like has like trusted and who's trusted her. Like that's somebody who knows them.
It's like the football player. You know all the stats.
Yeah.
You know all their highlights.
You know about them.
But you don't know what, music they maybe you do know what kind of music they like to listen to.
And it's like you could like a lot of that stuff is like people share a lot of things like that. You know what they like to listen to. You know their likes and dislikes. You know about them.
Sure, yeah. But personally knowing them.
Like personally knowing them and like being able to call them friend and like something like that. Like I would say like we've moved to a spot where it's like you can go through life without having like where you can hide.
Yeah.
Like I know that was a big part of my story is there's a period of time where it's like I kind of lived like a double life online and around my family where it's like I acted like I'm this missionary kid. I can hold it all together. I'm good. And then it's like I'm like in playing like video games online, like with massive multiplayer online games and just like I can be whoever I want to be.
Yeah.
And it's like, and that who I chose to be online was not good.
Interesting.
And so it's this like double life then that leads to where it's like, oh, I'm not like known by my family fully, which then leads to me not having as close of a relationship with them because they don't actually know me.
Yeah.
They know part of me. And they knew me better than like other people did. But it's like they didn't actually know me when I was in that situation.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so we have this spot now where it's so easy to hide.
Yeah.
And the harder part now is you have to choose to be known, I think.
Okay.
Like as I'm thinking through this, like I'm kind of coming to like you have to let people in.
Ah, okay.
Like if you go back like before people knew you
easy.
And like
you had almost
like you had no choice in the matter as far as like if you grew up in like a small village in the like even just early 1800s, like a small town, small village, it's like most everybody at least knew who you are and people knew what you acted like and interacted with you and knew what to expect from you and knew how you thought about things because of how you behaved.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. As you say that, I'm thinking like the small town America. I come from like a small town, West Virginia. Yeah. And it's very different than Maryland where everybody, you don't know anybody in Maryland, like in that situation. But in small town West Virginia, almost everybody knows you, you know almost everybody. Yeah. And it's like, it's bittersweet and it's kind of pros and cons because everybody knows you, but they also know you. Like they know you're good and the bad. Yeah. So it's kind of cool.
That's where it's like there are still microcosms where like it is more or less. Like that's where it's like we live in a really big metropolitan area, like being between Baltimore and DC. Like like this is a lot of people live here. Yeah.
So many.
And it's like so there's the element of that where it's like it's easy to not be known by many people. Right. Versus like and even if actually you look at it this way, it's like we might have the same number of people that know us about like the people in a small town would, but there are so many more people who don't.
That's interesting. Okay, so it might just be the same amount of people, it's just the higher percentages.
And so it feels like you're not as well known.
Interesting.
Because more people.
There's so many more strangers.
There are so many more strangers.
Yeah. I don't know. That's interesting because I will say there's a thing when you grow up with someone.
Yes.
Like when you grow up.
That is a big difference.
And then you move away and it's like, I don't know anybody here because I don't know their history. They don't know my history.
Yeah. So that's like a loose, that's at least something to consider.
Yeah.
And like
that could be interesting.
Like I think of the people that grew up here.
Okay.
Like our pastor and like other people that I work with where it's like their hometown is like 15 minutes from where they worked. Right. Like they were born 30 minutes away. Yeah. Kind of thing. And it's like, and they have those connections of people that they go, oh, I went to high school with them and I did this. And so they have that. And so, yeah, when you move away, that adds a whole nother level of like isolation and potential loneliness.
Yeah. So living in Maryland versus small town America.
Like, and I moved a lot growing up. Yeah. And so it's like, I never felt like I had a connection where it's like there's not anybody, my best friend is the only person who is like stayed a friend through like multiple moves. Yeah. Not the only, but the only one who stayed a close friend. I have a couple other people that I'm connected with, but like he's the only one that I'm like I said earlier, like I was on my phone for an hour last night. Nice. Just catching up. Yeah. And so it's like but he like we knew each other when I was in high school. He was like 18, brand new in the military. And that was almost like 8 years ago now. Okay. Coming up on 10 years that we've known each other. Yeah. 8 to 9 years. And so that's where there's an element of that where it's like, oh no, we know each other because we've lived a lot of life together. Yeah. But going back to that, as far as like, you have that element as far as like, okay, you didn't really have a choice in the small town. People knew you good and bad because they were there. They saw it. Yeah. But if you take out, so somebody moves. Okay. Or somebody just like really isolated and doesn't make the effort when they're little to go out and be known.
Mm-hmm.
Or now you have this online element where it's like they do so much of their life online and
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah.
out, not in person.
Okay. Yeah.
Where it's like they might interact with people, but they're like, to get more like into like hot topic type stuff, their political views, their views on like religion, their views on how people should interact, of like the roles of men and women, like all of these things, like their views as far as like what does it mean to be nice to somebody? What does it mean to be kind or good or to love well? Like, do they have a moral compass? It's like all of these things you can pretty easily in a lot of situations kind of like skirt around those questions in your everyday interactions with people.
Yeah.
Even if you grow up in a town where it's like everybody knows you, but it's like, but if you live on Reddit,
right,
that's going to shape how you think.
I was going to say, like, you can almost find those people to make it an echo chamber where you can only talk to people who have the same exact views.
Oh, that's it.
And if you're not online, or like back in the 1800s where we're talking about small towns, you kind of had to be around people that didn't agree with you all the time. And it kind of, it made us a better person, I think, and a better community as a result. I think because it's like you got to hear different perspectives and you got to hear different beliefs without just automatically blocking out and say, no, I don't want to listen to you.
Yeah. No, and I had that thought and I was like, I think this all leads together into that.
Yeah.
Of like, so it's like you have to be known. There's no other option.
Okay.
And then it's like you have more separation, and now you have this online digital thing. Well, now you have remote work.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like you can, and remote work, like grocery pickup or grocery drop off.
Yeah.
You can literally at this point in your life, if you didn't want to leave your house, you could actually not leave your house.
Yeah. DoorDash, you don't even have to go to drive through.
Yeah, as far as you could like live
That's true.
in the U.S. in certain places right now and not ever leave your home.
Yeah. That's wild.
And so you have this, basically this environment that's built up that allows people to be extremely isolated. And this is where I think the importance, like you talked about like in-person connections. So there's the two elements of it. One is communication, as far as like you can't ever really interpret what people are saying. And that's why like phishing calls are so rough, is because it's like in phishing texts and emails, because it's like they may say something in the most eloquent way in a text, but it's like if they were to tell you in person, you'd be able to pick up on it immediately.
So for those that don't know what phishing is.
Yeah. So
phishing,
phishing is not the fish as far as like
pole.
Going like fishing to catch fish, but
the lake.
It is basically like you hear about the prince in Africa,
right?
Like that's the classic like stereotypical example as far as like, hi, I'm a prince in Africa. I want to give you lots of money. I'm gonna do this. All I need you to do is give me your information for your bank account, and I'll send it over. And then they end up stealing all the money out of your bank account.
Yep. The Amazon delivery.
Yeah. So that's one of them.
Never ordered.
We had one that there was a guy imitating our pastor.
Oh, yeah.
And saying, hey, I need you to send me some gift cards for some volunteers. And we're like, he didn't.
What?
Yeah. And it's like, that's one, not his email. We know his email.
Yeah.
You're just saying you're him.
Yeah.
And then two, but it's basically anytime there's a digital communication, when it's in person, it's called social engineering, but like over digital, it's called phishing. Anytime there's a digital communication, it's trying to act like one person in order to get something, typically money from you.
Scam.
It's a scam.
Scamming text, scamming emails.
Phishing is a form of scams.
Gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, so the body language, like it takes a very skilled scammer to scam in person to your face.
Yeah.
Much less skilled to scam over email.
Yeah. Right.
But in a similar way, it's like, so you have that as far as like, what do people actually mean, actually knowing people. The other element of in-person that I don't know how to quantify fully, but I think there is something to be said here of it matters, of like physical interaction with people matters. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're always like, you have to hug people all the time and your hand, like handshaking, but like talking to somebody across a table is different than talking to somebody across the screen. And we all know this from COVID.
I don't know my source, but I've heard like when you shake someone's hand at a business negotiation, I can't remember the statistic, but it increases the likelihood of it going through.
Well, there have been studies, like one that comes to my mind is a study that was done with customer service at like fast food places or like retail stores.
Yeah.
And they said if your person was able to just like even brush somebody's hand, just the smallest amount of physical contact, and not in an awkward way,
Right.
but
Giving
just like,
change back,
but it's
taking
like,
the card.
like if you're a retail worker and you walk around and you just like, hey, let me show you, and you just tap their shoulder as you walk to this other thing, it's like sales went up, customer experience went up, like it just greatly increased the experience.
Yeah.
We are
Sales,
physical
that's crazy.
beings. We are not digital beings.
Right. And you were saying like COVID, we learned that with
yeah,
the
and we
6
see that.
feet distancing.
Yeah, as far as like we see that nobody, like there are some people that enjoyed the like being able to stay home and not having as many commitments kind of side of COVID.
Yeah.
But and my thought with that, sure, it felt nice because it relieved anxiety.
Oh,
But
okay.
but are you living a full life?
Yeah.
Like, do you have joy?
Mm-hmm.
Like I think joy comes from having friends.
Yeah.
That's like one of the areas where it does, not the only one.
I'd say the vast majority of people were struggling during COVID. I think that was a big,
Yeah.
I don't think you had to look far to see that it's scary times and didn't know what was going on and couldn't go out to see friends and family. You're afraid of them dying, you dying. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And so it's like, so with this whole like element of like loneliness, where it's like we're in a time of the history where it's easier than ever to physically isolate yourself and to not allow yourself to be known. And so, what are then the consequences of that?
Yeah. Very good question.
And what we see is there is an incredible rise in suicides, specifically in the U.S., but I don't think that's isolated to the U.S. And like there's rise in suicide of people killing themselves. There's rise in mental illness and depression. The consequences are that like our people are feeling like they're like the loneliness is causing like death.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like one of the things I look at, and so being like a believer in the Bible, there's so many times in the Bible when it says encourage each other, build each other up, like exhort, which means to challenge each other. And it has all of these things that are like each other, love one another. And there's even verses that say like, do not neglect gathering together. And while that's like at the most basic form, that'd be like going to church every Sunday. There's also like me and you connecting now.
Right. Just hanging
Friends,
out.
like connecting and like
having a backyard grill like you've had in the summer.
Inviting people over. Like, do not neglect being together. And it's like, we look, sometimes people see the Bible and they're like, it's just a bunch of rules, a bunch of the stuff. And it's like, well, why? And it's, if you believe that, and we're going to talk more about, like, we have talked about this, we're going to talk more about this, but it's like, if you believe that, it's, God wants our best, and he knows that we need people.
Yeah.
And so I think kind of like head into like, so this is the problem. Spend a lot of time identifying the problem. What's like our solutions?
Right. Right.
So the first one that comes to mind is it is so easy right now to not let people in that you have to actively choose to be vulnerable.
Okay.
And so that's
vulnerable.
This is being vulnerable.
So what does that mean? Like, does that mean like I'm going to just share my darkest secrets, going to cry at a table with a stranger? What does it mean by being vulnerable? Is it just being honest and like being your true self?
I would say being, and like that's as far as being honest, being your true self is part of it.
Okay.
But then it's like also finding people you can trust. And that starts with, I love this. Our pastor in one of our conversations that we had a while ago, he says, like you need to do like some target practice before you shoot the like cannon. Like if you look at like, if you're like, the analogy is kind of this idea as far as like you have a bunch of lead and that's like your vulnerable inside spot. So you're holding this. Okay. Shoot a few bullets first. Give like small pieces of you to
how they
people
handle it.
And see how they handle it. Do they gossip about you? Do they like make fun of you? How do they and just try it out. And then give a few more. And then give a few more.
Is it like weeks long or is it like, a couple of
honestly,
days long, months long?
It could vary.
Depends. Yeah.
It depends.
Just flex it out. There's no set
there's
time
not a set
or
time frame.
Okay.
I think that to get to the deepest parts of a relationship will honestly like unfortunately I wish it was faster.
Yeah.
Will probably take like years.
I was gonna say probably a long time
but
for the deepest.
But you don't have to wait for years to share hard things. And that's and also it's like
deeper and deeper.
There's kind of like different levels. There's the level of like I trust you, and there's the level of like, oh, you are the person that I love. Like from like a friend, like a genuinely like brotherly, like I want to live my life with you. Like not in the sense of like married people,
Yeah.
though that I think it does apply there,
But as friends,
but as
and grow
friends,
through
where
life.
it's like, I want to like, when you talk about people, it's like, oh, this is my brother, and this is the person that I like care about deeply.
Yeah.
I think that
good.
takes time, but how do you get there without trust first? So you have to take that step of trust before you have those feelings.
I was just hearing about like a workplace, like a leadership training that I had, is if your coworkers don't feel like they can trust you, they won't work well together. Like it just creates a bad, toxic environment. So trust is the first step to having a good team in a workplace. So it makes sense for living life and community.
And it's like, and you can't have that deep, like I long for, and I have it in at least my best friend, but even there's like, we don't live near each other, and so I don't get to interact, but it's like, I would say I have it in him for sure. And I'm like growing it, like I say with you and others, where it's like, we're heading in that direction. I would say, I wouldn't say that I'm like all the way there yet, but we're heading in that direction. I don't think it's outside of like, I'm like offending you to say it that way.
No. Yeah. No, that's fair. Yeah.
And where it's like, oh, I want that. I want that, like, oh, I care deeply.
Yeah.
And like, and I like would sacrifice for you and for your wife and for your family, and I would do this, and I want that. But you don't start there.
Right.
You
Takes
start
work.
with trust and reliability and consistency and time. And so it's like, if you never are willing to be vulnerable in the first place, you're never going to have that relationship.
That's good.
And so if you want to be known and loved, you have to trust.
Because you can't trust because if you don't give them anything to trust with, you can't really truly trust them. There's a little bit of like the trust fall.
Yeah.
If you don't give a trust fall, you don't really know if you can trust them, you know what I mean?
And so
until you do that fall.
So it's like you find people that you're like, oh, I want to know them better.
Yeah.
And then typically what you'll see is if it's somebody that is like worth knowing and worth having that type of relationship with, it's going to go both ways.
Yeah.
And maybe not fast.
Sure. Yeah.
But over time, like
take some time.
It'll go both ways. Like they're not going to just let you like, and you can even ask to be like, hey, like what's going on in your life?
That's good.
And when you ask that, if they are growing in trust of you, they're going to share that thing.
Yeah.
That truly. Is just a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
Like that thing that you like, where you're just like, pits in my chest.
Yeah.
Like as far as like,
I don't know if I should say this.
I don't want to, but
yeah,
let's do it.
Yeah. That's good.
And we see like, this is one of the areas where the Bible's right. And they talk about like confessing sin to another and you'll be healed. And like confessing something, saying something, and telling somebody about something wrong that you did.
Yeah.
Is one of the hardest things to do.
Yeah.
Like, especially when it's something you're like terribly ashamed of. So it's one of the hardest things to do. But at our church here specifically, and I've seen this other places too, but here specifically, I've seen it a lot. People do that, and there's grace, and there's love, and there's healing that comes from being able to talk openly with trusted people about these hard things. And that leads to like release from shame and like ability to like have and experience joy
in the right context.
Yeah.
Like you got to definitely be with some trustworthy
this
person.
is like, yeah. And that's why you shoot bullets.
Years.
You shoot bullets.
Little baby ones.
And you start small, but you work up to things, and you do it in a way that like basically it's like, you're just confirming.
Right.
Like it always start with the hunch as far as, can I trust this person? And they'd probably be like, yeah, probably, maybe not.
Yeah.
We don't know. And then you try.
There's a vibe. The 55% of the nonverbal cues you can kind of pick up is like, all right, this guy doesn't really care about me, kind of thing, or whatever.
And in that trust, there's also like the idea of like being able to sharpen each other. Like it's like iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. It's like a saying that is from the Bible, but people use it everywhere.
Yeah.
And so with that, where it's like, how do you sharpen each other if you don't trust somebody that they have your best in mind? Like as far as like, if you were to challenge me, I think I could take it pretty well. But if I didn't know you and you're like, hey, I think you need to shape up in this area, I'd be like, who are you to talk to me?
It's like, come on. Really?
Yeah. And that's how you grow. Like we want to like nurture growth. How do you grow without people like helping you?
Yeah. It's a challenge.
Because it's like, especially like in the area of like self-awareness, like if you're not aware of it, sorry, that's just how it's going to be until somebody tells you. And hopefully you have somebody that you trust that's close, that's you can like lean on, that tells you in a way that's like, I want the best for you, and that's why I'm telling you this.
Yeah. Something else I'm thinking I would also say if you can't find, or you're having a hard time finding that trustworthy friend, I'd say look in the mirror and say, how can I be a trustworthy friend myself?
Yeah.
To gain that trustworthy friend.
Absolutely.
And another kind of thing. So
that's definitely necessary. Like if you can't be trusted,
yeah, right.
Then why would people trust you? And then how are you going to find somebody that you can trust?
Right. Yeah. Do I gossip? Do I spread secrets of others to other people? Or, yeah. So that's interesting.
And so, so there's practical physical applications of this, but I think kind of like to somewhat wrap this up, and I may briefly address some of those, but it's like, we believe like community is necessary because we need people. We believe that we're designed to live in community with other people.
Yeah.
Like I personally, and from what I believe from scripture, believe that you can't have like full joy by yourself in isolation. The joy comes from experiencing things and celebrating things with people.
Yeah.
And then also,
I could see that.
There's also the element as far as like grief. You want to be able to grieve with people.
Oh man.
If you are going through extreme grief, and I go back to the story I've told before about my close friend, where it's like she had people to lean on.
Yeah.
And that's a large part, if not one of the main reasons why she was able to get through what she did.
Yeah. Oh man.
And so it's like, so there's these emotional and big elements as far as leaning on, and then you have the more practical things as far as like when you just need help. Do you have people you can call?
Right. A little bit lighter.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have people you can call?
Yeah.
You're like
same things like car issues, something like that.
Your car breaks down. Like me recently, I've been doing a lot of house projects, and it like it's been a huge blessing to have people like at different times just come out and help.
Yeah.
And even if they are like family and people you trust, like my dad flew out. We literally like with less than 24 hours notice.
Yeah.
Came and helped me for a week to try to finish my wife's office so that she could get ready for the today kind of thing. And he worked on it for a week, and he is not young.
Yeah.
And he worked hard, and I'm like always impressed where it's like, sure, he's starting to look his age, but he's still moving like he's young.
Yeah.
And so, but it's cool of like where it's like, oh, I like my family is somebody I can rely on, and knowing that, and I feel sad and like it's unfortunate for people that don't have that experience.
Yeah.
But it's like if I was doing this on my own, I'd be in a spot where I'm like, it's going to be months before I finish this, and I'm letting my wife down, and I'm frustrated, and I'm tired because I'm always feel like if I'm not at work working, I'm at home working, and it's just like, so being able to lean on other people was necessary for me to get to a spot where I'm like, oh, I'm excited about my house again.
Yeah.
And where it's going.
And you can help other people.
Yeah.
And you can take part of the joy that not. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, I feel like it could be self-centered and a little selfish of like, oh, I only need friends to help me out whenever I need help with it. It's like, no, it's like, it's a bit of both.
It's like, it is good to help people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Get a joy out of it. Like helping you with the house. I was like, man, I'm learning a lot. I'm having fun. This is pretty good.
Yeah.
Good,
and when you have a house, as I know you and your wife are hoping to buy eventually.
Yeah.
Hopefully sooner rather than later. Like, I don't know your timeline, but as you're looking to do that, it's like, yeah, I'm going to be available to help.
Yeah.
Like as far as when you have different stuff come up, you're like, hey, this happened. Do you have an idea how to fix it?
Right.
Because one, like having people that are just good at different things helps you to like avoid getting stuck with like crazy repair bills.
Oh yeah.
As like a practical thing.
Oh yeah.
Like I had a lawnmower that wasn't working, and I had a friend who just like knows how engines work, and he helped me take it apart and fix it and figure out what was wrong.
Nice.
Versus like if I had to buy a new lawnmower, like even a cheap used one is still a couple $100.
Right.
And so I'm like, but yeah, we were just able to spend a couple hours figuring it out, and it worked.
That's pretty cool.
And it's like, and I'm like, oh, okay. So it's like knowing people and knowing with different skills helps you in so many areas. And that's where you can get into some of the like more nuanced areas of like the preparedness side of things. As far as like, do you have friends that know, like, do you have friends that like know how to like, are doctors, are mechanics, are builders, are welders, are all these things where it's like when you need to rely on people to get things done and make things, are you just paying a random stranger to do it, or you can actually work with people and build friendships as you do things.
That's good. And learn cool skills. Like I'm sure taking that lawnmower apart, putting them back together is a fun thing that you can.
On a couple other engines,
right?
Like kind of thing. It's like since then,
it's so much better than like, I don't know, watching a TV show or whatever.
Yeah.
Other thing that you would do.
Sometimes. I like watching TV.
Yeah. There's some rest periods, I guess.
But in that where it's like doing things with people, especially for men.
Yeah.
There's an element where it's like most men are wired where it's like they build relationships with people by doing things together.
Yeah.
There are times when it's like, oh, I'm just willing to sit and talk for a long time. But more often than not, I'd prefer to like, let's do something together.
Yeah. Let's work on this.
And so find things you can do with people.
Yeah.
And that's the way you can build trust. It's like learn from people and like learn about them being reliable and do this. And kind of like to give some practical stuff with this is like, I would say this week, identify at least one person in your life who you want to know more, and just shoot a bullet.
Nice.
Not a little one.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Not
But shoot
literally.
a bullet of trust, and they'd be like, "Hey, here's one thing about me that I haven't shared with many people."
Get him a coffee, get him a beer, something.
Yeah, invite him over and just talk to him.
Yeah.
And share something that doesn't have to be that deep, but it just could be like for me, like there was a long period of time, and I'm still feel this way, especially living where we live, because like I like guns and I'm into that, into shooting, and in Maryland, that's not really a gun friendly state.
Right.
Like it's a pain.
Yeah.
And so there's still times here where I'm like, I'm not going to talk about that because I don't know what they're going to think. But there's a period of time where I was like very much like, I don't want anybody to know because I don't want them to like associate me with people they think are crazy.
Yeah.
And so I was like, so that's for a while, like when I moved houses, I like had a lot of coworkers come, and a lot of friends come, and I purposely decided, I almost made the decision to move all of my guns before, without like, so nobody would see them. And I was like, you know what? No, I'm going to trust people.
Right.
And I'm going to let them help me move my stuff.
Yeah.
Including those things that are like, I'm like, I don't really want to advertise
sensitive.
as much. And I'm just going to trust them.
Yeah.
Because I don't have anything illegal. Like I'm not doing anything like crazy. It's just some people don't like guns.
Yeah. It's like if you had like a big, I don't know, comic book collection, hypothetically speaking. Not that I had one of those.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't want people to know that I have comic books, like literal comic books. So it's like, maybe. But I did the same thing. Moved, had the comic books out, didn't move them beforehand. So
yeah,
people ask what you're like, oh, that's cool. They kind of jumped in on it. It's pretty cool.
So if you have like a weird hobby that you're like not sure if other people would be like totally like on board with you and like be like, oh, I'm bought in, like I love that.
Right.
But like you want to talk about that with them, and a good vibe was gonna be like, I can't. You watch that.
Right.
That's dumb.
Right. Yeah.
Like if they're like immediately jumping
show.
to that, you're like, okay, well, this probably isn't gonna work.
All right.
And that's a small bullet you can shoot.
Not my best friend. Yeah.
But it's like not that you never talk to them again.
Be your friends, just maybe not your closest friend.
And depending on how they do that too, if they do it in like a joking way, it's like, wow, you listen to that music, like
you like Taylor Swift. Wow, all right.
Maybe it still is that, but it's like that's where it's like learning how to like read body language and tone and interact with people is important.
Yeah. It's good.
But yeah, find somebody this week. Identify somebody at least.
That's good.
And then in the near future, seek to like just like get some time and just shoot a small like bullet of trust to figure out like, is this somebody that I can trust with even just a small thing, and then do it again. Do it again. Just keep doing it and keep growing that relationship.
That's good.
And here's one thing I do want to say. A lot of times people get frustrated because they don't get anything back. They're the one reaching out. They're the one initiating. They're the one starting things.
Okay. Understandable.
You cannot be dependent on other people to make you happy and to get you what you need. And that's where it's like there's an element of self-reliance that like in some circumstances it's great when people like care for you and reach out and like try to support you. That's great. A lot of times that comes after you've been somebody that has cared for them and relied on them. And you got to be careful of like getting into abusive relationships.
I was going to say, yeah.
You do need to be aware of that.
You know, you don't want that.
But if somebody doesn't immediately invite you over after you invited them over, don't count that as a reason to not talk to them again or interact with them more.
Give it a few times.
Like,
and then you can kind of pick up.
If you've tried to hang out with them over the period of months and they never text you, never ask you if you want to do anything, then be like, okay, probably this isn't working.
Yeah.
But don't take like the first lack of like interest or lack of response as like, this isn't going to work out.
Because it takes work. And chances are they're just as like used to not having, you know, people in their lives.
Yeah. And then there's a chance like if you're like, if you want them to do that and it's like you've built some trust and you talk to them, you share this podcast with them.
Yeah.
Like have them be like, oh, I want to like, do you want community? Yes, I want community. Like, okay, let's do this on purpose.
Yeah.
Let's actually like try to build community, and like it goes both ways, and recognizing that. And that's where it's like when you have good friends, you can challenge each other. Be like, hey, I really like hanging out with you. I would love if you invite me over to your house.
Oh, okay.
Like
invite yourself over. I don't know. I feel like you gotta be careful with that.
Well, no, and it's like And like, I would just want to hang out. And
So
because
how
like,
come I never see your place?
well, because that's where it's
Maybe
like people are so afraid to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think that with at a certain level of trust, it's like, okay, I've put in an investment. I've invested enough
That's fair.
at this point.
It's not a
where
first,
it's like,
first or second
where it's
time
like, I can
hanging
be
out.
like, hey, I feel like I give a lot
Yeah.
and I really enjoy the time I get with you and I want to have more. But like, I'd love it if you could like reach out occasionally
Yeah.
or invite me to
Right.
things and like, and just being honest.
Yeah.
And that's uncomfortable sometimes. But even how they respond is such an indicator.
Mhm.
Like if they get defensive and be like, oh, what do you mean? Like you expected something like, okay, you're like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, maybe this isn't going to work out. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But if they're like, oh, I didn't know.
Interesting.
And
yeah.
Or it's like, oh, I didn't know, or I'm not really good at that. I'm sorry.
Even if they get defensive, I'd say don't give up because
Yeah.
they could think about it after, I feel like people's initial
And
response is
It's
defensiveness.
true.
It's like, no, I'm not doing anything wrong.
But if they give anything
Just
but
think about it.
defensive, either on like lack of awareness is like, oh, I didn't even realize.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
it's like, oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just not good at that. And I
Yeah.
can try.
Yeah.
Like that's different.
That's definitely a positive. Yeah.
And yeah, if they do get defensive, it's one
Something to
thing.
work
But I would say if they like remain in that defensive place,
Yeah.
that's like, you're like, okay,
Yeah.
I might hang out with you occasionally. And if we have groups that are doing stuff together,
Mhm.
but it's like, there is something to be said for finding people that want, and I don't,
I'm thinking of myself with the defensiveness because my wife or my sister or my friends will tell me something and I'm instantly, nope, that's not me. I'm super defensive. Nope, you got it wrong. And then I think about it afterwards. I'm like, okay, actually, they're pretty right. They're pretty good on it. So
yeah. So no, definitely like don't take first response as the only response.
right,
But like look at patterns and look at like where people sit long term.
right,
But as far as like the thought that I had is in the same way that you want to be for other people,
hmm
it is okay to want people to be for you.
that's good. You want people who want the best for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the best relationships are when that goes both ways.
Yes, I agree with that.
And that's
Mutual
and
encouragement.
that's where it's like you get
Yeah.
excited when they win
Yeah,
and you're sad when they lose.
Yeah.
In whatever area of life that is.
yeah,
And when they feel the same way towards you, like it is just a special thing. And that's where it's like one of the things I love about like my best friend Andrew, where it's like I get excited when he succeeds and I'm sad when he struggles.
Hmm.
And it's like, and I've seen him like when I talk about like where like Tara and I are doing well, he's like, he gets excited and he's like, oh, that's so good. I'm like, I love that. That's,
Yeah.
and it's like,
That's
oh
good.
yes, like this
True
is
joy.
good. This is what I want.
yeah,
And it's filling and it's encouraging. And so it's like, be that person
yeah,
and look for people who will do that. And then like people aren't good at that.
yeah.
That's just
It's
the sad
tough.
reality. People aren't. And so there may
It's
be an
tough.
element of you have to kind of teach them.
Right. Be okay if they're learning.
Yeah. And you have
Yeah,
to kind of like, that's where
patient.
the honest conversation comes in where it's like, okay, I've invested a lot.
Right.
What does it take to take this relationship to the next level? It may be like having that conversation like, hey, I really want to like be good friends with you.
Mhm.
And like, do you want the same?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then can we like encourage, like if you can encourage me some,
Yeah.
and like
Right.
be excited, or when you do this, it comes across this way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just being honest about that. And that's where it's like,
You phrase it certain ways to make it
mhm.
not sound weird or clunky. Like, hey, do you want to be best friends?
Well, yeah, when it's about being
Or
honest,
it seems weird. Yeah.
be honest about like, hey, when you do this, this happens.
Yeah.
And like, when I share something I'm excited about, and then you talk about like
Yeah.
a different thing completely, I feel like you just didn't care.
I feel like most people would truly appreciate hearing something like that. Of
Yeah.
knowing that they are not, giving the right response
Yeah.
to certain things.
And
I feel
like,
like that's
and that's where you gotta learn
good feedback.
and like interact with people well. Where it's like, as you know somebody, you're gonna know if their response is genuine or not.
Yeah.
You'll know, because like, hopefully they're like, oh, I didn't mean to come across that
Right.
at all. And I think
Right,
that honestly is not that uncommon for
Yeah.
people just not to be aware of how they're coming across.
Mhm.
Because the sad reality is a lot of people, and I have struggled with this,
Yeah.
of like people are talking about stuff that's going on in their life. And I'm like, oh, here's a story that I've experienced that relates to that.
Yeah.
And what that can sometimes come across as is, oh, look at me.
Yep.
Look at me.
Yep.
Look what I did. And it's like, no.
Right.
Like sometimes it's just being like, oh, that's awesome. Tell me
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Keep on going. Yeah.
And so in an effort of trying to relate to people,
hmm
of being like, oh, I've experienced something similarly, I can actually
I
come
empathize.
across as like one-upping.
Yeah.
Um,
I've noticed that by myself too. Yeah.
and
Trying to
and that's-
empathize, but
and
it's
so
like, nope.
it's just
the
recognizing
wrong
those
way.
types of things
Mhm.
as you interact with people.
That's
I feel like
good.
we got a little bit into rambling at the end there, but
That's good.
I think there's something to be said. Community is important. and
Yeah.
you find like real friendship is something that I feel like so few people have right now, especially coming out of like COVID and everything that happened with just people being ultra isolated in our world. And so I think there's something to be said for like watching your digital presences. Are you the same person online that you are in person? And then finding people in person that you can trust.
Yeah.
And just trying.
That's good.
And just trying. If you don't know where to look, like it's like there's lots of different opportunities and places you can go to find people. Like if you are a believer and you go to church, find a church.
Yeah.
And find a church that like is willing to be more on the vulnerable side. Because there are a lot of churches that tend towards like really heavy towards legalism, and that's hard. It's hard to trust people in that environment. Not that you can't, but it's harder. So find a church that like talks about grace and like actually lives into that.
That's
good. And if you're like, Jesus is not for me,
right?
Like go to like community events, meet people. Like there's like a lot of cities will have like different like events going on.
Yeah.
And go do them. Meet people in your community.
Go to see shows.
I've been going to a poker night.
Yeah.
Just partly to meet people, but also because it's been fun kind of thing. And so it's like, go to places and actually talk to people. Like sometimes at the poker night, I have to remind myself, I'm here to talk to people, not just to play poker.
Right.
And so I have to like remind myself as far as like, oh, let's actually have conversations, ask them about their life, family, things like that. What do they do for work? But like, yeah, put yourself out there.
Neighbors, hobbies that you're into.
But yeah, we are in a spot in the world where you can choose to be completely isolated, and you have to make the choice not to if you want to actually have friendship and community.
Yeah.
And I can attest, and I think you'd agree, it's worth it.
Oh, absolutely. It's hard work, but it's worth it.
Absolutely. Well, awesome. Well, thank you for listening to this episode. Again, we're here to help you like forge resilience, nurture growth, and embrace responsibility on this journey to well-prepared life. Like, share, follow, get it out there. Get it to people. We believe this is good stuff, and we want other people to see it too. So anyway, we'll see you next time.
All right.